Welcome, everyone. My name is Mitch. I'll be your host here. And thank you for joining us for the sci-fi film series Independence Day. During the program, this is presented in partnership of Denver Museum of Nature and Science and Denver Film. And during the program, if you have any questions for our panelists, put them into the chat and we will be collecting those. And at the end, we'll have a Q&A section. And with that, I'd like to hand it off to Professor of Film and Media Studies at MSU Denver, Dr. Vincent Pituro.
All right, thanks, Matt. Welcome, everybody. It's great to be back here in virtual arena for a second straight year. But we have some good news. We'll get to that in a little bit about seeing you all in person at the museum, at least, and hopefully at the Film Center as well, coming up. But this is the first of our summer series this year, our summer virtual series. And as Matt talked about, we are discussing Independence Day. And hopefully you've seen the film. You were supposed to have screened it before. And if you haven't, of course, you'll get the, my grade and your report card won't be that great. We have with us Naomi Paquette from the Denver Museum of Nature and Science. She's a good student and she has seen the film, I think, several times. I think she knows somebody who loves the film. And or hopefully some of you have seen it, or some of you saw it last night at Film on the Rocks. And that's part of our partnership this year. And we've been teaming up with the Denver Film Society for 11 years now. This is the 11th year of the series. The second year that we're in virtual format. But this year we decided to partner up with the Film Society in a unique way by they're showing some films of the Film on the Rocks. And then the next day we are doing a discussion of that film. So hopefully some of you saw that last night. In fact, you could let us know in the chat if you did see it there last night. And or maybe some of you haven't seen it since 1996, and you'll be pleasantly surprised by all the great fun stuff we're going to talk about in terms of the film. All right, so as Matt said, I'm Dr. Vincent Pituro from MSU Denver, professor of film and media studies. One of my areas of study is science fiction cinema. I'm currently teaching a class on sci-fi cinema, a summer class at MSU Denver. And we also have a forthcoming book on the science of sci-fi that will be coming out. I'll mention it, 500 times tonight during the course of the screening, and where you can get the book. You can pre-order it now, but we will also have the book in our hands very soon. And you will be the first to find out that we are doing an in-person screening at the IMAX Theater on September 30th. Yes, September 30th in person at the IMAX Theater at the museum. We will be doing a book signing before the film. Then we're going to go inside and screen Arrival, the great film from Denis Villeneuve from a few years ago. Can't remember the exact year right now. Dr. Kachun Yu and I will be doing the discussion that night. We'll also be on hand again before the screening to do a book signing. And we're trying to talk Naomi into being there too, because Naomi wrote a chapter in the book on contact. We'll get a firm commitment from her tonight, so then she'll have to stick to it. And she'll be there signing as well. The book actually has 10 chapters, 10 films. I think it's, how many different scientists? 5 scientists from the museum, Kachun Yu, formerly from the museum, Dr. Nicole Garno, Jeff Stevenson has a chapter on King Kong. Kachun has 3 chapters, actually. Nicole Garno has 3 chapters, Jeff Stevenson. Joe Sertich has a chapter on Jurassic Park, which will be the 3rd film in this series this summer, all which you can also screen at Film on the Rocks. And who am I missing? We do an interview with Steve Lee on The Martian in the book as well. So it's a great book. I think it was super fun. Everything's in the publisher. We should have it in our hands soon. And first screening book signing will be on September 30th at the museum. So mark your calendars for that one. There's only 400 or so seats and that will sell out. But let's talk about Independence Day. One of the most scientific and accurate science fiction films of all, Yeah, I'm joking with you there. No, it's actually one of the least accurate and least scientifically correct sci-fi films of all time. But my colleague Naomi is going to talk about that a little bit more. I get the fun part of making fun of her the whole time as she talks about it. And we talk about everything that happened in the film. Now, I will say this, it's a fun film. It's a fun film. It's fun to watch. Make it part of your July 4th-ish, tradition and watch it. The film it knows what it is. It knows it's goofy. It knows it's campy. It knows it's not, like hard sci-fi by any means. Stanislav Lem is turning over his grave right now thinking about it. But there's a lot of fun stuff to it. A couple of things I will talk about are some of the characters, the characterizations that we see. I'll also talk about some of the references in the film to other sci-fi and how it uses those references and how that sort of works in the film. I will give you a hint of the sci-fi class I'm teaching right now. We are studying a film this week from 1953 that is one of the first films that's referenced in Independence Day. So it's a fun film. There's a lot to talk about in a lot of different areas. Start banging out your questions in the chat room. Matt will put those together, and we'll have a long time to answer questions about it. And they could be about the film itself, the filming of it, characters, any of that sort of stuff. Or it could be about the science or lack thereof in the film that Naomi is going to talk about. So go ahead and put your questions in there, and we'll get to them as soon as we're kind of done talking. I'm done talking. So let me introduce my colleague, Naomi Quet from the Denver Museum of Nature and Science. She'll tell you exactly what she does because it's really complicated and scientific and technical and all that stuff. So go ahead, Naomi, it's all yours.
All right, thanks, Vincent. And thanks everyone for joining us tonight. So as Vincent said, my name is Naomi. I'm a space scientist and an educator at the Denver Museum of Nature and Science, and so thrilled to be working with our new Space Odyssey exhibition, which you should check out, which has some sci-fi feel to it with our new fantasy spaceship. So definitely come take a look at that. But tonight I want to talk about the science or lack thereof around aliens. Of course, Independence Day, fantastical alien invasion, hostile aliens, right in, super America-centric, super not science-centric, but fun nonetheless. So I wanted to look at the probability that we could be visited by aliens and what that might mean. Especially because science has come so far in the last 20 or so years, actually making this film slightly more accurate than it was in '96. Time has done it just the tiniest favor, tiniest. So let's dive in. So let's take a look at probabilities. So when we talk about alien life, as scientists, we use something called the Drake equation. Promise you this is the last time you'll see math in any of our presentations. It's all good. Don't need to have any math in here. But basically what this is an equation that calculates the probability that there's intelligent life out there somewhere in the universe, except for Earth, I guess. So it looks at factors like how many stars are forming in the Milky Way? What are the chances that there are planets around those stars? What are the chances those planets are Earth-like? What are the chances that life could form? And each variable you add on makes this number smaller and smaller and smaller. So not only do you have to have the right type of star, the right type of planet, in the right orbit, then you need to have life, and it needs to be intelligent, and it needs to communicate, and then it needs to survive long enough for us to communicate back. So it seems like a pretty small number when we add this all up, but the last 20 years have been huge because we have really had this renaissance and amazing blossom of a science called exoplanetology. Up to date, as of yesterday, I should have pulled the number today because it changes every day, we've discovered 4,422 planets orbiting other stars. This is huge. In 1996, we had 1. So our odds are looking better. Congratulations, Independence Day. And of those, we have about 1,500 that are rocky. So we're throwing out the Jupiters, we're throwing out the Neptunes, any of those, we don't think life will form there. We're gonna look at Earth-ish like planets, which makes sense. The aliens of Independence Day had a lot of requirements that are similar to Earth, and frankly, it's the only set of requirements we know. So one of those big sets of requirements is that the planet has to be the exact right distance from its parent star, called the habitable zone. And this is going to give it the right temperature to be not too hot, not too cold, to have liquid water on its surface. And that's why we call it the Goldilocks zone, not too hot, not too cold. So you can see here's our solar system, Earth smack dab in the middle, but different stars have different distances in their habitable zone. So this is the TRAPPIST system, which was a really famous exoplanet discovery from a few years ago. And we have 3 planets in the habitable zone, but all of those planets would fit inside Mercury's orbit. So very close. So if we take all of the planets we've discovered, narrow it down to rocky planets, narrow it down to ones in the habitable zone, there are 60. So odds still not looking great. But SETI, actually the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, which we'll talk about in a bit, took this data and said, okay, well, if we extrapolate out, there could be upward of 300 million Earth-like planets orbiting other stars. Cool, could be in the habitable zone. So maybe there might be a harvester out there. Or they could be blasted away by radiation. So recent study by my friend Meredith McGregor up at CU Boulder found that a type of star we thought were great chances of hosting life, these red dwarf stars that are cooler than our sun, that live longer than our sun, that are more common than sun-like stars. We're like, oh, this is a great chance for life to form. There's a longer time period for them to exist. Turns out they have solar flares 100 times stronger than anything our sun does, and those planets are all 10 times closer to those stars than we are to the sun. So blasting away stuff with radiation, not so great. So moral of the story, could there be other planets out there that host life or intelligent life? Sure. But right now, our numbers, heck of a lot better than 96. Still not so great. All right, well, let's talk about SETI, because we actually see SETI in the movie. This is the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. And frankly, they failed us in this movie. This is no contact. They are out there listening for signals from intelligent civilizations. We're putting out tons of signals every day. Anytime we broadcast on radio or over the air TV, we're sending out signals into space saying, hello, we're here. Our closest neighbor, Proxima Centauri b, which does have a planet being blasted by radiation. If there was life there, they'd be listening to songs from 2017, thinking we're still in a total solar eclipse and enjoying our happy, carefree life pre-pandemic. And so they could pick up that signal, send it back to us like they do in contact. Same goes for us. We could pick up an alien signal. SETI doesn't look like this, and they would have detected it before it got to the moon. That's all I can say, is that they didn't catch the signal until it got to the moon. I think they were probably transmitting a longer period of time. In fact, Independence Day Resurrection seems to hint that they would be sending out more signals. So yay for using a real science term, but getting it wrong. But here's where they really fail, but it's okay, is the fact that they didn't see this thing coming. So NASA has a huge initiative called Planetary Defense Office. And one of its big initiatives is looking for near Earth objects. So these are objects bigger than 140 kilometers. The ship was 550 kilometers in diameter. So totally in this range, that get within 4.7 million miles of Earth. So to their credit, this didn't exist till 1999. But we now have visible light telescopes, infrared telescopes, radar, radio astronomy, looking out in the sky, finding objects and characterizing them. And we definitely would have spotted this long before it got to the moon. And frankly, amateur astronomers in the 90s probably would have noticed some blacked out stars too, but that's okay. Let's say we get the aliens. They exist. We didn't detect them. They arrive on Earth. What are they going to look like? Well, I have to give Independence Day a little bit of credit here because they were going for a classic sci-fi look. That involvement with Area 51, they wanted that classic little gray man of an alien look, and they nailed it, right? This is, when we think of aliens, this is stereotypically it. Even my earrings look roughly like these aliens. And so they're humanoid in nature, they're small, but then they wanted a more horror feel as well. And so they introduced those biosuits to give them that little bit more of a fearful look, that otherness. So could aliens look like this? I'll give it to them, right? They did compare them to humans a lot. They're about as fragile as humans. They're wanting to harvest all of our resources, They breathe O2. They have similar tolerances to heat and cold. So maybe they developed on a very, very Earth-like planet somewhere else in the solar system. Okay. And it's using a typical sci-fi trope of panspermia. Life is going to look similar everywhere. But I like to think we would see something even more bizarre. I think of Carl Sagan, and he had this quote that said, "If you'd never seen a cockatiel, could you even imagine it?" So imagine squids, cockatiels, giraffes, anything that doesn't look like a human. If you had no reference point to it, would you recognize it as life? And why wouldn't an alien have a weird form like that? Who knows? The one beef I have with this, though, is looking at their eyes. So if you see their eyes here, they are very reflective. In fact, you get a great view of the scientists when they're going in to do an autopsy on this alien, reflecting in his eyes. How does it see them? Because if it's reflecting visible light, it's not looking in visible light, which kind of busts our theory that they came from a planet like Earth. Because the reason we see in the spectrum of light that we do is because that's what our star puts out, is mostly visible light. So their eyes don't seem to quite fit that adaptation. But again, it's science fiction, and this is Independence Day. And frankly, they weren't going for accuracy. But I did really appreciate the biosuits for a couple of different reasons. They did purposefully try to make it not look like a man in a suit. So that's good. Kudos to them. But it also makes a lot of sense scientifically. When you look at fighter pilots and astronauts, they're not going anywhere without a specialized suit to protect them. Even if you think you know a planet's Earth-like, pretty much any science fiction will have them be in some sort of spacesuit or specialized suit to make sure that they have all the tools they need for breathing and for the proper atmospheric pressure. And it had great defense. Those crazy tentacle things coming off the back were certainly handy for them. It provided some extra protection, being kind of exoskeleton-like is what the creators described it as. So I'm trying really hard to give this movie points for scientific accuracy. So check, one there. So is anyone out there? Scientists have done some analysis. Anywhere on like a not so conservative estimate says there might be 36 intelligent civilizations out there. In the meantime, we're still listening. We haven't heard them. They certainly haven't attacked us. And yes, the military did say there is no evidence these are UFOs. Well, they are UFOs. They're unidentified. They're flying. They're objects. But no chance that they're, not a great chance that they're aliens. So is Independence Day happening in a few weeks? We're probably pretty safe from aliens. And so with that, we'll turn it back over to Vincent and any questions that you all have.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Naomi. That one picture though of SETI you had up there,
Yes.
you should probably tell everybody that that was actually the scientists who got stuck in the museum during COVID, right? With their pajamas on.
We were back at our houses with the pajamas on. Yeah.
Fake instruments and dials and stuff.
Totally.
Let's talk about some of the references for a second in in a movie. So I'm looking at the chat here, and I want to see if anybody. So if you have any idea about some of the references in this film to other sci-fi or classic sci-fi or not so classic sci-fi, let's just go ahead and put them in the chat, and I'll talk about one, and it's the first one, I guess. Well, I guess there's a couple of them that you see. Really, the first one I think is 2001: Space Odyssey, and the opening shot, 2001: Space Odyssey, is a shot from the moon looking at Earth with the sun also in the background. If you remember that shot. I have a little bit more to say about that shot from 2001: Space Odyssey, but I'm going to save that until we actually screen 2001: Space Odyssey later this year sometime, and we do it live, and then you have to read my chapter from the book. Did I mention we have a book coming out? Naomi has a chapter in it. We'll talk about that a little bit more as we get to 2001. But that first shot from the moon certainly is a reference to 2001: Space Odyssey. The next reference that I caught was the classic sci-fi, The Day the Earth Stood Still. And we see that in the beginning, that whole beginning montage when we meet all the characters. And we meet the family they're in the trailer and they're watching TV. And it's an old sci-fi film. And the film they're watching is The Day the Earth Stood Still. And so there's a sort of a little interesting thing going on there. So first of all, The Day the Earth Stood Still is really kind of known as the first great alien invasion movie. Although there's not really an invasion. It's basically one alien. And but the alien comes to Earth, lands in Washington, D.C., and basically says, you're all gonna have to get along here or we're gonna blow you up. Because we don't want you to be a menace to the rest of the galaxy. And they were sort of like the galaxy police. And that's kind of the sort of the idea of that movie. But it was also, it was known at the time, it still is if you watch it now, it's serious sci-fi. It was sort of grown-up sci-fi. The sci-fi previous to The Day the Earth Stood Still was really, I mean, if you take out Metropolis, if we take out Metropolis, which by the way is our second film of this series, is going to be super fun. You have to watch Metropolis on your own, by the way, you have to. Get a good version of it. The Denver Film Society has it on their virtual platform. You can watch it there. But you want to see the Metropolis, the restored version, the complete restored version. That's the one I suggest. All right, but if you take out Metropolis, most of sci-fi before the early 50s was sort of goofy sci-fi serial kind of stuff, like Buck Rogers things. If you kind of think about that. All right, so Day the Earth Stood Still was known as serious sci-fi. So what's the reference to it in Independence Day? The kids are watching it on TV. They have a kind of a just a TV with an antenna, and the pictures kind of going in and out. So as they're watching that movie, all of a sudden it goes off, like they lose the signal, right? And in the movie, it kind of makes sense because all the signals are being lost, around the Earth. The point I got from it is this. Independence Day wasn't going to be serious sci-fi. It wasn't going to be anything like The Day the Earth Stood Still. So it's on the screen for a second. Hey, this is our serious sci-fi. Whoops, let's get that off because we're not serious sci-fi. So it sort of announces itself very early on that it's just a movie that's going to have fun. It's going to have fun with itself. It knows what it is. It's going to even make fun of itself, along the way. And there's comic relief, throughout the entire film. Day the Earth Stood Still, there's no comic relief whatsoever. Some of that serious 50s sci-fi, like Invasion of the Body Snatchers, even, Forbidden Planet. Forbidden Planet, for example, too. There's really not much comic relief, maybe a little bit, but nothing like there is in this film. So immediately the film announces that it's not a serious sci-fi film. It's going to be fun. It's going to be campy. Naomi talked about a couple of the things, that aren't really particularly right with the film. And we can go on and on and on, right? We could talk about, one of the main characters going to the base just happens upon the First Lady, in the middle of, disastrous Los Angeles, right? And so all these weird happenings, coincidences. The Jeff Goldblum character drives from New York City to DC in a span of like 10 minutes. And if you've ever been on I-95 between New York City and Washington, DC, even without traffic, it takes like forever to get there. And I'm sure there probably would have been a little traffic at that point anyway. There's a lot of that stuff, but we tend to just let that go and enjoy the film. And so I think, if you want to read a scathing review of the film, go back and read Roger Ebert's review of the film, who talks about for the entire thing, how this is wrong and that's wrong and this is horrible and this is coincidence and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then the last line of it, he says something like, I really like the film anyway. And so that's how I sort of see it. As a film professor, it assaults all of my film professory sensibilities, my critical analysis skills. I kind of put those away and just say, hey, this is kind of fun and it's funny. And who doesn't like Will Smith, especially at this point in his career, when he was like in between Fresh Prince and the Men in Black. And, he was Will Smith playing Will Smith and Jeff playing Jeff Goldblum, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All right. So that's the reference to Day the Earth Stood Still. So, right, we had Day the Earth Stood Still. I don't see anybody else with, I'm sure you caught um, um, Space Station Devlin, I think it was what it's called in the film, where what they're looking at on the screen is a schematic basically of the Death Star, right, from Star Wars. So if you didn't catch that, you can kind of go back and see that comes up in there. There's also a reference to Star Trek. Anybody want to give us their take on what's the reference to Star Trek in the movie? So you can put that in the chat. And there's a couple of other little ones throughout the course of the film, but let's see if you can come up with any of those in the chat, and we'll have some fun. We'll have some fun with that as well. Now, if you want to get serious about the film and sort of look at this as, hey, let's look at this film as allegory and really talk about the kind of political allegory at work here, we can talk about that too. Think about the time period here. It's 1996. It's a period, sort of after the first Gulf War. In fact, there are Gulf War veterans, in the film, or characters anyway in the film that were Gulf War veterans supposedly in real life. But it's before September 11th, which is a few years away. And so it's kind of a time in the country when there was some fairly decent goodwill. There was some patriotism in the country that was still alive. And you could really kind of we can talk about how this film has this sort of really rosy, positive outlook, right? Where Americans are the leaders of the world. And, everybody's waiting for America to come up with a solution, to fight the aliens, right? And that's how kind of we thought about ourselves at this point. Americans were the leaders of the world. America led, everybody followed, waited for our lead, took our lead. We can also look at how the film really tries to portray this multicultural, multi-ethnic, multiracial, multi-class society where everybody comes together to fight a common enemy. Everybody has to get along, right, for the country to be successful behind a white male leader, of course, right? It really kind of talks about the patriarchy. A white male patriarchy has to be in order, then everybody else can kind of get along so we can, fight the enemy. We can talk about that if you want to, because of course that's how it's played out in reality, right? We all get along in our country, right? Multiracial, multi-ethnic, everybody just works together so well in this country and around the world. So we can talk about that if you'd like to as well. Or we could just talk about how fun the film is and funny it is and interesting it is. So with that, why don't we get to, the other thing, sorry. The other thing I wanted to talk about too is this film is also known as the film with the most models used for the filming of it in the history of cinema. So if you remember, if you've been to any of the talks on Jurassic Park over the past few years, I have talked about how Jurassic Park changed cinema because it started CGI. It was the beginning of the CGI revolution. Jurassic Park was the seminal film for CGI. They still used models and in some respects. This film was only a couple of years later after Jurassic Park. So while there's some CGI in it, there's also a lot of models going on too. After this came out, models, went the way of the dinosaur. And films started using CGI almost exclusively, and models were gone. So there's really never going to be another film with using as many models in it for special effects as Independence Day. So we can talk about some of that, CGI, special effects, models, all that sort of stuff too. So there's a couple things to think about. Questions in the chat, answers in the chat. If you want to talk about other sci-fi references, what's the reference to Star Trek? I don't know if anybody put that up there yet. Naomi, anything you want to add to, or before we turn over to Matt and do some questions and some back and forth?
I think one of the things too, you mentioned it, there's plenty of things that gets wrong, but you just kind of wink and nod at it with sci-fi, right? Like, of course, Will Smith can fly an Earth airplane. So of course he can fly an alien spacecraft. Of course, yeah. Jeff Goldblum repairs TVs and is somehow now a computer programmer that could hack a mysterious binary signal, not of Earth origin, which would be hard enough, but of this alien spacecraft. And having spent a lot of time
put in those viruses, negotiating with host, connecting with host. And at the end, he has the skull and crossbones, laughing. He can add all those things in, and he had like 15 minutes or so, right, to do it.
Right, and was drunk through most of that time where he was coding that. So, but again, it's not meant to be taken super seriously. It's fine. I will give a shout out to my friend Jennifer, who is watching, who's also a museum educator, who was very excited about the clicker training of the dog, and how well trained the dog was. So again, if we're trying to rack up points for accuracy, we'll give that dog a point.
I agree. As a historian of film, the dog training in the film was excellent.
There you go. I like it. So I'd say let's open it up to questions and see what you all are curious about with the film.
All right, we have some great questions already. First, for the astrobiologist on the team, I can't remember which one of you that is, but Owen is wondering, how was the alien still alive after the scientists cut it open?
So what it cut open was biosuit. So that is functionally that what they were trying to design is like a living exoskeleton to give these aliens a more insect locust-like feel to them. And so the alien was well and alive inside of that suit itself. Now, how it survived the crash and being dragged across the desert by Will Smith and kicked multiple times, apparently it's not as fragile as a human. It's fine. Or maybe that biosuit really was super protective. But remember, it was cutting into that biosuit, not the alien itself. So,
right. And if I remember correctly, there was some goo in there. So that was probably nutrition goo.
Magical alien goo from a higher technologically advanced society that saved it all. Yes, Vincent, you're very excited about the higher technological goo.
They actually used KY jelly for the alien goo.
That's right. I forgot about that.
Sorry, kids.
Wow. Very effective. And Vincent, some people pointed out they remembered one of the computers sounding a little bit like HAL 9000.
He does. It says to Jeff Goldblum, "Hello, Dave." Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Right. Hello, Dave. Yeah. That's HAL 9000. Good. Did anybody catch the Star Trek reference in there? Did anybody come up with that?
I did, but did anyone else?
Go ahead.
Let's see. Well, I just recognized one of the main actors from The Next Generation.
Right. Brent Spiner, who played Data in TNG. For those of you who aren't like really cool Star Trek people, that's The Next Generation, TNG. And yeah, so he plays the mad scientist, who, what was the quote before? Who said he was Fabio or something like that?
Yeah, I think it was the Honest Trailer called him Nerdy Fabio.
Yeah.
Nerdy Fabio. Yeah. And, Data would have taken out that alien, and wouldn't have been strangled and, used as a vessel. Data would have had that all straightened out.
So, Naomi, can we talk about those death rays the aliens were using? What kind of ray was that? How would you build it? And how would you transport it through the galaxy?
That's a great question. So those death rays are a staple of sci-fi, right? We've got phasers from Star Trek, Star Wars, of course, the Death Star and its death ray. So we see it here again. And this is something the military and scientists have been pursuing for a while. Nikola Tesla was actually purported to have created a death ray that could shoot 400 miles away and tried to get the military to buy it. They didn't. But the US military has actually investigated using lasers, which are just very concentrated beams of light. I have a laser pointer somewhere behind me. That, commercially available, we have very small ones, right? I'm not going to destroy LA with my red laser pointer, or even my green laser pointer that can make a line into the sky. But the US military actually did investigate this, trying to have a space-based weapon of that. It was defunded in 2011. They were trying to use different materials like potassium and other materials that weren't normally used in lasers to try and make them smaller, to make them stronger. Still very large, but like I mentioned, this darn ship was 550 kilometers in diameter, which is like 324 miles. Each of these smaller ships that went over cities were 15 miles in diameter. So they got plenty of space and magic space technology that they can fly faster than the speed of light and carry all the things and have unlimited fuel. So, woo, just don't look behind the curtain.
We're going to call that one plausible.
Sure, yeah, totally plausible. I mean, happening tomorrow.
And Dr. P, we have someone referencing something they learned in your class.
Wow.
Someone point out, which I have a still in the film behind me, and you'll notice the Twin Towers are still there.
Yeah.
They're saying this movie was made when it was fun to blow up buildings, blow up landmarks, and then 9/11 happened and changed all that. And then sci-fi started looking elsewhere for enemies. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Oh yeah. How much time left? How much do we have left here? Yeah. And besides, again, I don't want to ruin something I talk about in the book. Did I mention that we have a book coming out and that Naomi has a chapter? One of the things I talk about in sci-fi in the class, and I've talked about before, I've talked about it in this series before over the years, is that 9/11 really changed a lot of things with movies. You know, that's one of them. Buildings just, you know, don't blow up. I think we saw what like a futuristic city blow up in the second Star Trek. Was it Into Darkness? The second Star Trek of the reboot trilogy. We saw something, you know, we saw the city blow up, a building blow up, and it was really sort of shocking to everybody because we hadn't seen much after September 11th. There was also a really huge thematic shift after September 11th in science fiction film. And that thematic shift, to sort of really oversimplify the whole argument I make, is before September 11th, there was always an other. There, you know, so Independence Day, the other is, you know, the aliens coming. That's right, an easy one. Or, you know, in the Matrix was just before September 11th. It was machines were the other. You know, it was humans were always fighting something, right? The other. In Alien, it's the alien is the other, right? After September 11th, that really changed, and the other in sci-fi became us. So we are always kind of essentially fighting ourselves. It was a great sci-fi film from, I think it's 2011, a small independent film called Monsters. And there, you know, the premise is that many years ago, we had sent a probe out to the moon of Jupiter, Europa, and they came back with some alien samples, and it crashed land and landed in this area, like, which is sort of North Mexico right now, I guess. And aliens grew there and they became these monsters. But in the film, they're not the other. The other is just us. It's just people. The monsters just are fine. They get along. They just want to kind of do their own thing, but it's we as people that kind of screw it all up. And so that was a huge thematic shift, you know, after September 11th, in a really kind of somber shift after September 11th as well. The photo you have behind you, you know, for me is always heartbreaking because I'm a New Yorker. I grew up in New York, and, you know, going to the Twin Towers right after they were built, and several times, you know, over the course of my lifetime. And even if you just visited New York and you know that shot there, I remember the first time I flew into New York after September 11th, it was just heartbreaking, you know, to see that sort of empty space there, that emptiness. Yeah, it's interesting to see that, and, you know, on film these days, but to watch it now, looking back. I do want to mention this, though. We were talking about the death ray coming out of the spaceships, and the scene where they blew up the building in LA, which is now the US Bank building, I believe. And the people are standing on top of it and welcoming the aliens, right? So when they filmed that, they actually did it on the top of the building in LA. People were up there, but they had a helicopter come in, you know, so it's kind of like, so the people had something to look up to and, you know, to play off of. But the helicopter was, you know, covered so they could do green screen and all that sort of stuff. People in LA didn't know what was going on, so they were calling local police stations and fire stations and news stations, thinking they were being invaded by aliens and that it was a UFO that was on the top of the building. So I always love that. And of course, that brings up a reference to War of the Worlds, right? Because of the famous Orson Welles radio broadcast where people thought it was real. And as Naomi can tell us, one of the premises of the original War of the Worlds, the book, the H.G. Wells book, was that the Martians died from a virus. And so we see that turned into a computer virus here in Independence Day.
I mean, I would even argue some of the ship shapes that we see of those individual fighters are reminiscent of some of the film versions of War of the Worlds as well. Some of that nods to it, which was a kind of a fun homage, because way better than any of the War of the Worlds films, in my opinion. The book's great.
However, the series that I think you talked about last year, the year before, you recommended to me, I think is fantastic.
I do too. The new War of the Worlds series is fabulous. It's a fantastic modernization. It has really good science in it, surprisingly. I think it is one of the best adaptations I've seen, or the best adaptation I've seen. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's the only representation of an astrophysicist that I've ever seen anywhere, actually, anytime, anywhere.
Hey, there's Stargate SG-1. We got Samantha Carter in there too, but this one a bit more accurate, fewer wormholes and Stargates.
More worlds, and you're a sci-fi fan, the new series is on Epix. You can watch season 1 for free. Season 2 is on right now. In fact, I'm a couple days late on the next episode. So let's hurry this up because I have to watch the next episode.
Well, you talked about spaceships, and that's a perfect segue. Naomi, a lot of people are pointing out that these ships are massive. How would that affect Earth's gravity? And also, how are they able to hover so close to the Earth?
Yeah, the question that got to me, so we see those ships entering, and you can see there's a bunch of heat around them. They form clouds. There's clearly condensing water vapor in our atmosphere. And there's a bunch of them that enter all at once. And one of the questions that, frankly, I didn't feel like doing the math on was what would the effect of our atmosphere be of that huge object and multiple of them around the world entering all at once due to our climate, in terms of them hovering magic alien space technology. Duh. Yeah.
Maybe they use their gravity diffusers to power those death rays.
Right, with the force field that they also have. I mean, honestly, the thing we need to find out from these aliens is what is their power source? Because gosh dang, it seems infinite, because we hear that these aliens are going planet to planet harvesting. We don't really hear if they still have a home world, if this is their home civilization. You get hints of it more in the 2016 sequel, but dang, that's a lot of power to power that much life support, that big a weapon, that great an engine. So that's what we should learn from them.
We have another question that I think is both about film tropes and science, which is the dog survives by quickly jumping into a doorway as a fireball goes down the tunnel. Mm-hmm. How plausible is that? And what's the story with dogs always surviving? I mean, I'm for it personally, but I'm just curious.
I mean, Will Smith's partner and her son and that dog probably wouldn't have survived. When you have an explosion like that, you probably would create a slight vacuum effect that would have ripped them out of their hiding spot in that tunnel and also not left any palm trees standing. But of course the dog has to survive, because wouldn't have you just turned off the movie if the dog hadn't survived? It's a critical plot point there, I think. So
yeah, actually, I was watching this the other day with my 12-year-old son, and as soon as he saw the dog in peril, he jumped up and he said, "If the dog dies, I'm not watching this thing anymore." And so I think that's the answer right there. And but I mean, seriously, for a second, studies show that most people are way more disturbed and horrified by the death of animals in movies than by the death of humans in movies. So dogs, animals of any type, are used for pathos, total reasons to speak to our emotions.
There's a website out there called doesthedogdie.com, and you can check any movie before you watch it and find the answer to that question. Naomi, I'm going to mispronounce this. How likely is it that Oumuamua is alien tech, which was a cigar-shaped asteroid that came flying through from a different solar system? Is that right?
Correct. Yeah. So we think this was probably likely a space rock from another solar system that came flying through. Unfortunately, this incident was very transient, right? It flew through and it left. It's not like we are looking for it to return. It's not even like a long period comet that we could wait 100 years to reanalyze it. Scientists did get a lot of data out of it, as much as they could, and trying to analyze composition, Again, if we go with the Independence Day theory that SETI can't detect anything further away from the Earth and that a spaceship wouldn't transmit anything till it's right by its target, then great. But I would think there would be some sort of communication, something going off. But the current theory right now is it's an asteroid from some other sort of planet, and oh boy, we wish we had more time with it. Is it an alien? Absolutely, because it's not from our solar system, nor is it from Earth. Is it intelligent life? Right now, the consensus is probably not, but wouldn't have that been cool?
It would have been cool.
Can I just say something, interject something here too? Somebody said the force field is similar to Star Trek. And yeah, absolutely. I just think the big mistake the aliens made in this movie is they didn't stop at Romulus and got the cloaking device.
Right.
Unless they did have the cloaking device and they just they took it off like when they got to the moon, and that's why SETI didn't see it. So there goes all your science stuff, Naomi, all your sciencey stuff. Duh.
I know. We just need the invisibility cloak from Harry Potter meets the Klingon cloaking device, and they would have been much better.
Well, Romulans had it first, then they traded it to the Klingons for warp drive, and started.
Although I will say there actually is some serious research about this idea of invisibility or that kind of cloaking technology, of looking at materials that are transparent to certain wavelengths, opaque to others, and using some crazy optics to bounce things around. Is it as small and lightweight as you would need for a giant spaceship, or heck, even a cloak? No, but the research is happening, just like with death rays. Trying to science it.
Cuttlefish seem to have kind of figured it out.
Yeah,
so
a little bit.
Figure out what cuttlefish are doing. Also, Dr. P, someone mentioned that they were reminded of Arthur C. Clarke's Childhood's End, with the sinister giant spaceships just appearing and hanging in the sky.
Yeah, that's a good one. Gosh, yeah, I mean, we talked about 2001 Space Odyssey and, Arthur C. Clarke, it's based on, the Sentinel, I guess. So yeah, I see that. I'm searching through my memory banks to remember that story. And I kind of remember something, about giant spaceships hanging over cities, right? I forget what happens to them though. Don't they just leave in the story? If the person who wrote that, I forgot what happens after.
I believe the aliens appear, and there's a rumination about the nature of time because they appear like traditional depictions of the devil. So the idea is that that future event resonated through the past and informed all those histories.
It also is used in District 9 too. When the aliens come in District 9, those giant, saucer-like ships that just hang out over the cities as well. Of course, District 9 borrowed it from Independence Day, though, not the other way around.
And Naomi, when the mothership exploded, wouldn't that ionize the atmosphere?
Yeah, it wouldn't be good.
Also, what does that mean? It ionizes
so basically what it would do is when you have an explosion like that, you're adding a lot of energy into the system, a lot of heat. And so what that can cause is electrons to hop away from their atoms, right? And so that's an ionized atom. And it creates conditions that are not so suitable for life after that point. You also have a huge pressure wave impacting the atmosphere. That's probably not so good either. But with one of the things we think actually happened with Mars, for instance, is that repeated solar radiation hit the atmosphere of that planet once the magnetic field was gone, and stripped away that atmosphere, right? It started to ionize things, it started to blow away that atmosphere. Now, this mothership, while Earth has a magnetic field and was inside our magnetic field, could something similar have happened? It probably would have done some damage. It probably wouldn't have been a happy day of that. So not so great there.
All right. Yeah. So you're saying that celebration at the end would have been shorter than it was depicted in the film?
Probably. I mean, honestly, Earth would have had a lot more issues than what was depicted in the film. But then you wouldn't have had that great scene where Will Smith and Jeff Goldblum can just walk away from the crash like in The Right Stuff,
Which someone did call out in the comments.
Yes, they did. I saw that. So.
All right. And Dr. P, are you still there?
Yes, I'm still here. Sorry.
Okay, great. Somebody was wondering if about depictions of Area 51 in movies, and specifically how easy it was to break into it in this particular one.
Yeah, well, one reason why it was so easy to break into is because movies, whenever they want to use military or any sorts of military typey things, the movies have to get the permission from the military. Military works with them sometimes, and they use equipment. Once the military found out that Independence Day was referencing Area 51, they pulled out. They pulled out of the movie. So that's one reason why Area 51 wasn't defended very well, because the military pulled out. You didn't get that one. I'm trying to think of other examples. I know there was an animated movie I watched with my son a long time ago, Escape from Planet Earth, I think. When they come back in Earth and they land on Area 51, and there's just this little kind of rickety sign that says Area 51, and they just go right by it. But gosh, I'm trying to think if there's any others. I'm drawing a blank if there's any. Well, certainly no other instances where it's less defended, but then yeah, I mean, well, I guess a lot of the military is wiped out, though, right? So any military would have been called away to help out in fighting them, and then was it like 90% of the military or something, or I think it was 88% of the military is wiped out, right? Is it Robert Loggia character says at one point 12% of the military is left intact. But yeah, I can't think of any other examples.
Thinking of military and that base, we do meet a character there, Adam Baldwin's character, who of course plays Jane in Firefly, so another sci-fi reference. To get a little nod in there. And the really terrible guard is an actor in Stargate SG-1 as well. So not looking so good for future sci-fi there.
And if anyone has any more questions, we're running a little short on time, so get them in there. But for the moment, I just want to remind everyone that our next event is on July 13th. It'll be a discussion of the film Metropolis. And then on July 22nd, we're doing the film Jurassic Park. And so Metropolis will be joined by Kachun Yu, who is an astronomer at the museum. And Jurassic Park will be joined by Tyler Leeson, who is a paleontologist and discovered his first dinosaur bone when he was 12. So really knows what he's talking about. All right.
Yeah, we all though. I mean, we all.
Yeah, I mean,
gosh, I mean, those paleontologists, they think it's so like everything they do is so important, right? Yeah. Hi, Joe. I hope you're listening to this.
Okay.
I did want to say so. Yeah, somebody mentioned the right stuff before. Yeah, that was in there. We talked about War of the Worlds. It's fun. I think it's fun in the movie how so many films show up and they try to use so many different references.
Yeah. Oh, and I left out in the upcoming events, September 30th, of course. I think there's a book. Is there a book?
There's a book.
There might
I've
be
heard
a book.
about this book. There's rumors of it.
And that'll be in person at the IMAX theater. So very exciting. Mark your calendars.
We'll be screening Arrival, with Amy Adams, and it's a great film. There's a lot to it. If you've seen it, you kind of know what I'm talking about, and maybe you saw it and you didn't understand it, didn't sort of get it. So you should definitely come to that screening. We'll talk about it, and you get a chance to get the book, get it signed by some of us. And let me talk about the second screening that we're doing on July 13th, Metropolis. If you've never seen Metropolis, it is the seminal sci-fi film from 1925, I believe. So if you haven't seen it before, it's a silent film. So when you watch it, just so you know that going in, I know people have said to me, wait, I started watching it and there's something wrong with the sound. There's nothing wrong with the sound. It was made in the silent era. It's a monumental film. So many of the aesthetics from sci-fi have come from that film. So many themes of sci-fi have come from that film, and we'll talk about all of that on that night.
Excellent. And so I think that's about all of our time, but one final question for both of you. Just for our audience tonight, what should they do if they meet an alien from space?
Don't assume it speaks English. Like all aliens seem to. It's fine. And this is the time to bust out that math textbook to communicate, but also probably run.
I would say punch it And smoke a cigar right afterwards.
All right. Excellent advice. Excellent advice. All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us tonight. Somebody asked in the chat that I believe this will be on the DM&S YouTube channel. Is that true?
I believe so.
We believe so, that you'll be able to watch this again on the YouTube channel.
But
And
it's definitely not going to be repeated. That's for sure. Yeah. You can watch the rerun.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Everyone, have a wonderful night and go watch Metropolis.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to that. Thanks, everybody. Thanks,
And order that book that Vincent keeps mentioning.
Yeah.